Is it true that 50% of FDA's budget is funded by pharmaceutical companies?
I think it's more than that.
More than that.
I think it's closer to 72, 73 now, all in.
What does that mean?
Well, they have a different, so it's a user fee basically, right? And that's it's a user fee. So that's where they can hire staff to pay attention to those files. They work closely with the pharmaceutical companies to review their documents, to review their studies, to get approvals, and it's a pay for. So now they're still part of FDA. A big part of FDA is appropriated through Congress, through our tax dollars. It's a public trust, right? FDA was started by a guy named Harvey Wiley, kind of poison squad after the jungle and the poisonings in the stockyards in Chicago. And so, but it's changed quite a bit since then. It was the Pure Food and Drug Act. Now it's a lot of people say that food shouldn't even be at FDA anymore,
right.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. How much attention do they put into food?
Based on what we've seen over the past 24 months with things like what happened with infant formula, I think that kind of question.
Yeah. Can you explain what happened with infant formula?
Yeah, there was a bacteria that was found with some manufacturers that shouldn't be there, and the agency knew about it and did nothing, effectively, is what the story is. And just kind of said, oh, okay, it'll be fine. It'll work its way through the system. And it didn't. And some kids got really sick, and it led to a huge shortage of infant formula because basically everything that was on the shelves had to be brought back, recalled, whether for retesting or for destruction. And that certainly created a number of problems for people.
Was that Johnson & Johnson who made that, or was that am I thinking of a different product?
It was a division of Abbott.
Abbott, that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And there are some versions of the story where there might not even been the contamination. It might have just been more of FDA's errors. And I think that's really the challenge is, what's the best thing the agency does? The agency was started, kind of back to that poison squad, to inspect and test, right? To go into facilities, make sure that the facilities are sanitary, there aren't processes that could damage the products, and randomly test. And when they don't do that, like FDA didn't visit that facility for a long, long time, you kind of go, what is it they're doing then?
Yeah, they're supposed to be like the arbiter of safety when it comes to all this stuff, and it seems like they've just become like the worst part of human nature has infected the FDA, similar to the way it affects the other industries like defense and everything else.
It's become politicized. Your food and your drugs are incredibly politicized now, which that was really, it's part of the reason FDA actually is a third-tier agency in the cabinet, president's cabinet. They don't report, no one at FDA reports directly to the president. They report to the Secretary of HHS. And that was by design to keep them apolitical. The opposite has happened effectively in the past 20 years.
Can you explain how that's changed over the last 20 years?
Well, I think what's happened is people have pushed down the people they want politically into these under organizations, right? So it was never you have folks that are at FDA for life. I don't want to get into the deep state stuff or any of that stuff, but you have folks that are there for life. And it's like, there's really not a lot of checks and balances on that because one, the higher political levels are in and out pretty fast, right? And they'll set an edict forward and then they'll be gone 2 years later. Whereas the folks at kind of the base level, they operate somewhat freely to do what they want, and I think a lot of times their personal politics comes into play, and they're not accountable to those because the people at the levels above just go in and out pretty quick, and so in some ways they've become independent from some of it having to answer politically, but they're making it up as they go along. I mean, they've been defiant, especially on the food side. There was a Reagan-Udall review, which actually is a third party, kind of a foundation that looks at FDA consistently. They looked at the foods program and tobacco program, and they found that the food program at some point just stops answering Congress. And it's like, well, wait a second. Congress has oversight over FDA. Congress funds FDA. That's who they have to answer to, and FDA just wouldn't answer on some of the food stuff. So
really,
yeah. So that's a challenge, right? Is like how do you bring them into a place where they go, wait, I swore an oath to protect American life, to help, to protect babies in the case of infant formula, to make sure things are going right. That's concerning, to say the least.
How do patents affect certain things like pharmaceutical drugs and other things like that? And how is FDA involved in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Patents are, pharmaceutical IP, I would say to the agency is those are crown jewels, right? They think pharmaceutical IP is in a lot of ways their reason for existing, right? FDA works hand in hand with somebody who did a lot of research to get a blockbuster drug to market, and they get user fees for it. Like we said, 70% of the user fees. So they're protecting their investment, right?
Who gets the user fees?
FDA does.
Okay.
So, like I said, so that IP drives those user fees, right? That IP around, hey, I have a potential blockbuster drug, and I'm going to bring it to market. I'm paying you to make sure you review things in a timely manner, because the quicker I get to market, the longer my patent life, the better off I am.
But don't the patents drive up prices like astronomically?
They certainly can. And usually that's what happens. Branded drugs are obviously cost a lot more than generics. And, you have a runway on your branded before it even can become a generic, right? You get 17 years effectively, plus or minus, however long the approval process took. So in that 17-year window, would you rather get to market in year 2 or year 13?
Right.
So
do other countries have these patents with drugs like this and with?
There's definitely material protection. I mean, there is in other countries. I think the challenge here is you really do have that direct correlation. And I'm not saying that user fees are always a bad thing. It makes people accountable. We need blockbuster drugs in some ways. We need new developments. We need innovation.
Right.
At the same time, when you see an article like there was in Bloomberg on Monday that said, hey, there are drugs that were fast-tracked that are still making claims that were never authorized, that's when you go, well, wait a second, where's the check and balance there? And that seems to be done just to kind of like, oh, hey, you know what? You paid us a user fee. We fast-tracked it, and hey, do what you want to do, which is people should kind of scratch their heads and go, well, wait a second.
Right, but the patents themselves, these people are able to get 20-year monopolies on certain drugs. Yeah. Doesn't that completely stifle innovation?
It can. What happens now more and more is somebody looks to extend the patent life by way of adding it with another drug or making another claim for it, right? So if you have a patented drug and it's about to come off patent and you combine it with another therapy, you see this a lot of times in cholesterol reduction, things like that, then you get even more patent life and more exclusivity. So you're seeing that a lot. I think that's one of the challenges that's out there right now is where are we? And it's part of the reason there's all this battle about, and it sounds like insulin prices are going to come down, but it seems like there's all these battles, about pricing, about open market, about the marketplace. And I think those are good discussions. It's definitely more front facing than it was before. I think in some ways though, and especially for our industry, I think what we're seeing for the dietary supplement industry is you're seeing that process, that patent process or the IND process being used to keep others out of the market, which wasn't the intent. The intent was you're going to file an IND, you're going to have the IP, are you going to develop it? If you're not going to develop it, okay, how are you still able to block someone out from the market indefinitely? That's a problem.